A teacher at Mponcheng Secondary School crossed the line. He abused his position of power. This is the story of a young student who endured an unthinkable violation. It happened on October 24, 2022. The teacher, who had been at the school since 2016, touched a grade 10 student inappropriately. He touched her buttocks. This act, a shocking breach of trust, left the student terrified. She ran from the classroom, seeking refuge in the familiar safety of her own. This incident was not just inappropriate, it was criminal. It was a betrayal of the trust placed in educators. Teachers are meant to protect and guide, not inflict harm. The student's sense of safety was shattered. Her school, once a place of learning and growth, now held a dark memory. This incident should never have happened. Imagine the fear and confusion this young student felt. She had been wronged by someone she should have been able to trust. Yet, she found the strength to speak out. She reported the incident. This act of courage is commendable. It is never easy to come forward after experiencing such trauma. But she refused to be silenced. The teacher, realizing the gravity of his actions, became desperate. He tried to cover up his wrongdoing. He approached the student and her mother. He offered them a sickening deal. He promised academic favors in exchange for their silence. This attempt to buy their silence was a blatant abuse of power. The student and her mother faced a difficult choice. They could remain silent, protecting the teacher and potentially benefiting from his promises. Or they could fight for justice, knowing it would be a difficult path. Their courage was unwavering. They refused to be silenced. They refused to let the teacher get away with his actions. They took their case to the Education Labor Relations Council. They shared their story. They presented their evidence. The council became their platform for justice. They bravely faced their abuser, determined to hold him accountable. Section 4. Holding educators accountable. The council's verdict. The Education Labor Relations Council heard the case. They listened to the evidence. They considered the testimonies of the student, her mother, and the teacher. Finally, they reached a verdict. The teacher was found guilty of misconduct. The council did not hesitate. They dismissed him from his position. Arbitrator Malola Gloria Rabyanyana presided over the case. She had strong words for the teacher. She called his actions improper and disgraceful. She condemned his attempts to silence the victim. Rabyanyana stated that his actions brought shame to the teaching profession. Section 5. Safeguarding our schools. A collective responsibility. This case is a wake-up call. It highlights the importance of protecting students. Schools should be safe havens. They should be places where students feel protected, not preyed upon. This means holding educators accountable for their actions. It means creating an environment where students feel safe to report abuse. Parents, educators, and the community must work together. We must be vigilant. We must listen to children and believe them. We must create a culture of zero tolerance for any form of abuse. Section 6. Building a future. Free from fear, a call to action. The fight for justice does not end with a verdict. This case is a reminder that we must remain vigilant. We must continue to demand accountability from those in positions of power. We must empower students to speak out against abuse. Every child deserves to learn in an environment free from fear. It is our collective responsibility to ensure their safety and well-being. Let this case be a catalyst for change. Let us work together to create a future where every school is a sanctuary. A future where no student has to endure what this brave young woman faced.
Hey there. Ready for a deep dive into a story that's, unfortunately all too common, but no less important to unpack.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at a case of educator misconduct in South Africa. And let me tell you this one.
Right.
It takes some twists and turns along the way.
Interesting.
Our source material is a news article about a teacher found guilty of some very serious offenses.
And it's a chance for us to go beyond the headlines, right? Because this isn't just about one incident. This is about power dynamics and societal blind spots and the responsibility we all have to protect those who are most vulnerable.
Yeah. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's October 24th, 2022 at Imponching Secondary School in Hong, South Africa. We have a teacher who'd been there since 2016 accused of inappropriately touching a grade 10 student.
Right?
To protect her privacy, we'll call her KKRM.
Now, put yourself in the shoes of a 17-year-old student. You're in an environment that's supposed to be safe, where you're there to learn and grow, and then someone in a position of authority, someone you're supposed to trust, violates that trust in such a fundamental way.
Right.
The article talks about KM's reactions. The shock, the confusion, the fear. It really underscores the power imbalance at play here. How difficult it can be for a student to speak up against that kind of abuse of power.
Absolutely. And it's a heartbreaking reminder that these situations happen far too often. The article says that KM confided in her friends, which
Right.
I'm so grateful for because they recognized something was wrong and encouraged her to speak up.
Right.
This led to KM's mother and the school getting involved, and that's when things really start to unravel in a way that reveals some deeply concerning behaviors.
What's fascinating here is how the evidence unfolds. There's security footage of the incident, and KM's mother, upon seeing it, immediately labels the teacher a predator.
Wow.
That's a powerful word, and it makes you wonder, is this a pattern of behavior or an isolated incident? What would lead someone to feel comfortable acting in such a way, knowing the potential consequences?
Right. It's like a giant red flag popping up.
Yeah.
But hold on, because as if the initial act wasn't bad enough, the article goes on to say the teacher tries to cover his tracks. We're talking attempts to silence KOM, even recorded promises of academic help.
Oh my gosh.
And get this, a bribe if she drops the case.
And the content of those recordings, as described in the article, is chilling.
Yeah.
It exposes his manipulation tactics, how he leverages his position and promises of academic success to try and pressure a vulnerable student. It really makes you question his character, his moral compass, his understanding of right and wrong.
And this is where it gets even more complicated because now we're moving into the hearing process.
Okay.
The article goes into detail about the hearing, and it mentions that KOM was understandably emotionally distressed.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine being in her shoes, having to relive that experience, and then facing the person who's denying it ever happened?
It's a common defense mechanism, right? Denial. Especially when there's evidence to the contrary. But here's where it takes a turn that I bet you weren't expecting. According to the article, KOM's mother and aunt arrived at the hearing.
Oh, wow.
Wait for it in the teacher's car.
Okay, now that's just strange. Yeah.
It definitely raises questions about the mother's actions and what her motivations might be.
Exactly. And the arbitrator in the case picked up on it too. The article even mentions the arbitrator questioning why a parent would seek comfort in the company of the alleged perpetrator. It casts a shadow of doubt on everything, and it makes you wonder if there were attempts to influence the case. Maybe even bribe KOM's family to drop the charges.
And sadly, those concerns about bribery weren't unfounded at all. The article goes on to describe an alleged bribe negotiation between the teacher KOM's uncle and potentially even KOM's mother discussing dropping the case in exchange for money.
Wow.
It's heartbreaking.
And this is where we start to see the broader implications of this situation. It's not just about one teacher, one student, one incident. This speaks to a potential erosion of trust within the school system and the community. It makes you think about how often these kinds of offenses might be handled quietly, swept under the rug, with attempts to silence victims through financial means or pressure. It's appalling, right? To think that someone would even consider putting a price tag on justice, especially in a situation like this. It makes you wonder, where does that leave a young girl like KOM, who's already been through so much? What message does that send?
It's a betrayal on multiple levels, and it really highlights the complexities of power dynamics and the lengths to which some individuals might go to avoid accountability. However, there's a glimmer of hope here. Despite these obstacles, the arbitrator in this case saw through the inconsistencies and the manipulations.
You're right there. The article states that the arbitrator found the teacher guilty of misconduct, and she didn't hold back in her assessment of this situation. She called out his betrayal of trust, his predatory behavior, and emphasized the responsibility educators have to protect students, not harm them.
It's a small victory in the face of a systemic issue, but a significant one nonetheless. That guilty verdict sends a clear message that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated.
And it's not just a slap on the wrist either. The article makes it clear that the teacher was dismissed from his position, which is a crucial step towards accountability.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But as we've seen the impact of this case, and others like it, it extends far beyond one individual. This has much wider societal implications that we need to address.
This case really shines a light on a much larger issue, don't you think? It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality of sexual misconduct against learners
Yeah.
and how deeply ingrained these patterns can be.
Mm.
The article even quotes Buti Manamela, South Africa's Deputy Minister of Higher Education,
Right.
who points out that these harmful practices often stem from traditional and religious doctrines.
Manimala's point is incredibly important here. He's saying this isn't just about individual accountability, right? It's about
Right.
challenging and changing harmful societal norms that have often been overlooked or excused.
Right.
It's about examining our own biases and preconceived notions about gender and power and creating an environment where young people feel empowered to speak up and seek justice without fear of reprisal.
It's a call to action for all of us, right?
Ab-
We can't just sit back and hope things get better. We have to be proactive in creating a safer, more equitable future for all students.
Absolutely. This case highlights the crucial need for education awareness and open dialogue about consent, respect, and healthy boundaries. We need to equip students with the tools and knowledge to recognize and report abuse,
Right.
while also fostering a culture of accountability within educational institutions.
It's about creating a culture where those in positions of power understand that their actions have consequences
Right.
and that exploiting the trust placed in them will not be tolerated. It's about believing survivors and supporting them as they navigate what can be a very difficult and isolating process.
And it's about having those difficult conversations even when they're uncomfortable,
Yes.
even when they challenge long-held beliefs. It's about understanding that silence only protects perpetrators and allows these cycles to continue.
This case, as troubling as it is, really underscores the importance of speaking up, of demanding better, and of working together to create a future where education is a source of empowerment and opportunity for everyone, not a breeding ground for exploitation.
We can't erase what's happened, but we can learn from it. This case and the voices speaking out against this kind of abuse remind us that change is possible, but it requires collective action, courage, and a steadfast commitment to justice. I hope this deep dive has given you much to reflect upon. What will you do to contribute to creating safer learning environments for everyone?